For many of you who follow this channel's contents on a regular basis, you know that I like to engage featurettes, and maybe not everybody does. And I also am very familiarized with the analytic reports that these videos tend to not necessarily get the most expanded viewership possible in comparison to maybe other typical offerings that other people would cover, let's say, and what more people are focused in on. For example, trailers, TV spots, stuff of that nature in regards to marketing releases. Featurettes tend to be engaged on a much more minimal scale, I think, broadly speaking. But I like to get a better perspective so I can best appreciate the art I'm watching and to know the mindset of the creators and the artists going in at a deeper level rather than just appreciating the movie, on its own. And for Knock at the Cabin, what brought me in immediately is not the story. I'm a complete novice in regards to how I approach this. I know nothing about the original book. I'd be curious to read it, though, and again, engage with it. Even though, as I also said originally when I covered the first trailers a couple minutes ago, I, kind of debate which approach to take. Sometimes I'll watch for trailers, for a project first in consideration, then I'll go watch the movie perhaps, or I'll go read the book first even before covering a project. Let's say, for example, by past examples, Hillbilly Elegy, I read the book before I even engaged with the trailer, and with Dune, it was the opposite. I haven't even read the book yet, and I said I wanted to. Knock at the Cabin is a case, let's say, of the latter, but I'm curious on it. What immediately brought me in is not only perhaps Universal has done a pretty good job in regards to a lot of their thriller, horror type films recently. The casting attributions of Dave Bautista, Rupert Grint, even as a first introduction to Kristen Cui, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly again. I apologize if I didn't. I made a big spiel about this in the last one. I try to get pronunciations right. As a first introduction, she seems to be doing a really good job here, as many child actors do these days. Jonathan Groff, I'm a big fan of him. Ben Aldridge, he's definitely a more up-and-coming actor from what I've seen in terms of his name status. He's certainly expanding. This movie impressed me on a quality level. In particular, M. Night Shyamalan's attribution, so I'm a big fan of. I've loved his films for the majority of what I've seen thus far. I still have yet to make my way through some of them, but I've really enjoyed watching his releases, and his name is all over this thing. It's a suspenseful thriller with a pretty atmospheric story, it seems, but I'm curious again to learn more. I've really enjoyed engaging with his pieces, and I'd love to be able to understand more of his vision going into this particular work of his. Because my viewing experiences of his particular releases have been quite fun. Like I said in the first video that I covered of Knock at the Cabin. Glass, even though I'm still divided on that ending, I think a lot of people are. I love the setup to that movie and the overall viewing experience, not just in the audience that I went with, which was great. As I also said, I was the only person there with the 8 of us total who had engaged with both Unbreakable and Split. Some hadn't even engaged with Unbreakable, but nobody there knew Split. I was the only one. So I'm like, hey, it gives me a bit of a status as I'm watching this project. I know what's going on here better than you guys do. But, I don't mean to be overly boastful. I'm more humble than that. But I appreciated it, as a film. It was a fun experience. I really enjoyed the craft and the vision of the movie that M. Night is very well known for, and deserves to be known for, in my opinion. And I've heard good regard to this movie in regards to its scope. Again, like I said, it seems like a particularly modern story in many elements, given that you've got Jonathan Groff and Ben Aldridge. I always forget his name. I'll try to remember. Again, as I said, he's working his name into the atmosphere of, I think, more mainstream stars lately, because he's been in the Pennyworth Show for a little while. He was in that recent, spoiler alert, film of Jim Parsons. So he's definitely growing, I would say, in prominence. But they're at the center of this as two parents who have adopted this young girl character's name of Wen, and they're in a secluded cabin in the forest somewhere where they have this mysterious group of people come up and try to convince them, I guess, the apocalypse is happening, whatever that means. It's still a very atmospheric story. Like I said, it feels particularly modern. And I made no secret about this on the channel, or in particular about last video. Now, I am looking at this in some respect Christian eyes, and so perhaps you can guess my, opinion, though I try to put it quite kindly. I'm primarily looking at this from a craft perspective. And M. Night Shyamalan is an immediate attractant. And the first couple trailers, they definitely provided a very atmospheric, suspenseful thriller ride. I get that energy, although it does appear in many respects to be a lower budget picture. I'm not judging it in terms of quality. A lot of horror films tend to be in that environment. These are horror/thriller. It's probably going to have horror undertones. It certainly has a discussion point of that. In regards to bringing this film up in consideration, maybe breaking it down with those you visit with, maybe if they're family, or just talking about it in general. Maybe you reveal the point of view of the movie. If these 4 characters are walking in, demanding that you sacrifice somebody to save everybody else in your family. Like, who would you choose? Well, I can think of a couple names. I'm kidding. Hey, look, everybody has fun family exposures and interesting stories, right? Anyway, it's a dark point of discussion, but I think in terms of atmosphere, it's quite an absorbing movie to get into, especially on the first approach. I'm curious with it. I'm thinking more so I'm going to watch it on streaming, because I get very busy these days, and I got a lot of work I got to consult, so it just seems a little bit easier for me to access this project that way, and it does appear to me in physical presentation to be a bit more limited in scope, in my personal opinion. I could be wildly wrong about this. I'm welcome to that perspective down below if you wish to disclose it. Since it's now in theaters and it's just made its way in, if you're somebody that's viewed the movie and you would disagree with me on that point, being like, no, you have to watch this in the theater, let me know down below, and I will make that decision accordingly, with my schedule, which is constantly getting filled up. But to me, it came across a bit like streaming fare, and it's probably going to be the way I access it unless something else changes. But I want to learn more about it. I want to get a better vision, and perhaps this featurette will also speak to the scope of the book to give me a better baseline, but I imagine it's going to focus more so on M. Night's craft, which he deserves to be recognized for, in my opinion. Again, the guy is a revered director with good examples to back that up. Anyway, plenty of them. Let's consider Knock at the Cabin as a release from a deeper perspective, though, and get a deeper, or more richer experience with it. Anyway, gives us more to appreciate going in.
There is a family, and their home is invaded by 4 strangers who've been asked to make a choice of sacrifice to save humanity.
Why are you here?
I suppose I'm here to make friends with you. And your dad's too.
Again, why did nobody teach this child? Don't talk to strangers.
Type of storytelling that when you come to the movie theater, you want to see something incredibly powerful, incredibly emotional, experiential, but you want it to be bigger than life and feel something bigger than life.
There is no place to run. There's no place to hide. So I think it's like layers of nightmares in this film.
It's an investigative story. There's multiple, there's a depth to it.
I'm very drawn to stories of confinement and telling very large stories through a small window.
I am too.
That constriction, that balance, a juxtaposition of the size of the story and the way we're telling it is very exciting to me.
Families throughout history have been chosen to make this decision.
It's an atmosphere I embrace routinely as well, so I get it.
The 3 of you, if you fail to choose, the world will end.
Again, it's just like Noah's flood. The revamped version?
The worst places, but I think that's what makes it terrifying. I think it's just that feeling of being unsafe.
There's something quite seductive about apocalypse movies, I've always found. It kind of combines 2 of my biggest nightmares, home invasion and the apocalypse.
I suppose what really struck me was that it was brave enough to go on a kind of deeply spiritual journey, even though it's in a very interesting and...
So if a Noah's Flood label would possibly apply. I don't know.
To make a movie that feels serious.
Probably not. My kid. It just looked like that based on the tsunami. I'm like, that's what's coming. Good way to wrap that up. You know, I agree with a lot of M. Night's points, and again, he's done very well, I would say, in regards to smaller budget type fare. I mean, he did this with Blumhouse for, I guess, 2 releases. I know The Visit, I think, had the same respect. I haven't seen that yet, either. But, you know, from pictures I have seen, he is a very capable director and atmospheric filmmaker. I really do enjoy engaging with his works. I have not seen Old yet. I want to. I did cover that a while ago, and it looked good. And I've heard good mention on that one as well. Knock at the Cabin, I'd say from an atmospheric perspective, and perhaps from a story perspective. Again, I haven't looked deeper. So what this one actress is referring to, I thought she was Lashana Lynch for a minute, and she's not. Nikki Akuma Bird. I don't think I've seen her before. I haven't consulted her filmography in detail. But what she had to say was pretty interesting. I think it gives a sophistication as well to the story that I would imagine is brought about by a conversation of the apocalypse, especially one that's based on the imperative decision of, well, said doom is coming, and you better, I guess, section off somebody in your family to remove. I mean, it's such a sad prospect, though. Anyway, it seems like a pretty deep story. I'm curious to engage with it, particularly on the M. Night Shyamalan atmosphere credit. I really enjoy watching his works, and again, what he spoke to with that contained vision, telling a grand story, easily speaks to me in regards to interest. Glass did that, but it was more so based on just one setting for the most part, with minor exception, and that film had a great scope to it. Again, an ending I'm still mulling over years later, but I generally have fun of his works, so I'm curious to engage with Knock at the Cabin on that level. Again, I might not necessarily have a perspective where I'm like, oh, it's totally perfect. You know, I've voiced maybe some of my minor grievances, but again, I'm keeping that respect minor because I don't necessarily want to dwell on it as a point, especially from what I've heard, even if maybe this movie in particular, and again, to be fair, it's based on a book that I believe have the same context to it, even though this film is particularly modern in energy, and I've heard this opinion from some I've seen in the audience, or general audience, at least that's what I consult more so than I do official critics, who have seen the movie. They've said it doesn't come across as where I would think it'd be a risk. It's apparently not too preachy. And I guess the context of the film is more so based on that thriller atmosphere. That I find engaging, especially amid a temptation that I see among a lot of different films these days to go down the more preachy route and to put the message first over a great story. And as somebody who appreciates a good story, and is not always necessarily in agreement with the message, nor oftentimes the exhaustion of said message, and like, well, you've said it once, you've said it enough times, in many different projects. And I'm not necessarily speaking directly about Knock at the Cabin, because I understand that's a general credit from what I've heard that doesn't necessarily dwell on certain points, and allows the story to be better fleshed out on its own individual merits. Let me know your thoughts down below, though, on Knock at the Cabin and what you think about it. Whether you're somebody who, at this point, again, like I said, as I'm covering this, I'm a bit late. I apologize. Like, I'm late to everything, it seems. I'm working on it. I know I keep saying that. If you've seen it, no spoilers, please, if you can refrain, but I'd be very curious to hear what you as an audience member have to say about the film, as well as those of you who perhaps are looking at this on a first impression. And like I said, you know, I take a bit of a different path in comparison to other people who cover films and cinema and stuff like that in regards to what I cover, and that I have an open perspective on featurettes, and I consult these a lot of the time, but I like to get a deeper sophistication in appreciation of a project, to give it, you know, the reverence perhaps that it deserves. And I would say of Knock at the Cabin, specifically just a temptation of M. Night Shyamalan's name, there's probably enough to consider on credit alone there. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.